My sister made my husband and me sit at a separate table at her engagement party because we're not as rich as her fiancé, but her face turns pale when her fiancé comes to meet my husband and says this. My name is Anna. I'm 32 years old, and I grew up in a humble neighborhood where money was a distant dream. My parents worked hard. My dad is a factory worker and my mom cleaning houses, but it was barely enough for the basics. My younger sister, Sophia, and I came from that world. Second-hand clothes, simple food, and cold nights without heating. While I saw it as a challenge to overcome, Sophia took it as a personal offense, something she had to erase at all costs. From our teenage years, we took different paths. I studied with scholarships, worked night shifts at a supermarket, and pushed myself until I earned a degree in administration. It wasn't easy, but I built a stable life. I married Javier, a good, hard-working man who started at the bottom in a construction company and, over the years, became someone important, though he never bragged about it. We live well, we lack nothing, but we don't flaunt fancy cars or expensive trips. We're happy keeping things low-key. Sophia, on the other hand, used her beauty as a ladder. From age 16, she dated older guys who bought her things, clothes, phones, fancy dinners. She never had a steady job or responsibilities, jumping from man to man, always chasing someone with more money than the last. If one couldn't give her what she wanted, she left without looking back. My parents tried talking to her, but she ignored them, saying she wasn't going to live like a pauper for the rest of her life. When I married Javier, she looked at me with contempt, as if my quiet life was a failure compared to her adventures. A few months ago, Sophia announced she was getting married. Her fiancé, Marcos, was a successful businessman, part owner of a big company. She presented him as her golden ticket, constantly talking about his huge house, his trips, and his important connections. She invited us to her engagement party at a lavish venue, the kind where everything sparkles and smells like money. Javier and I didn't quite fit in that scene, but she was my sister, so we went. I wore a simple dress, and he wore his usual suit. We weren't the most elegant, but we were presentable. When we arrived, the place was full of wealthy people, women with expensive jewelry, men with watches worth more than my house. We looked for Sophia to congratulate her, but she was busy posing for photos with Marcos and his friends. One of her acquaintances led us to our table, and that's when the problem started. It was in a corner, far from everyone, with an old tablecloth and half-dead flowers. The other tables had luxurious decorations, but ours felt like a punishment. Sophie approached after a while, in a dazzling white dress with a forced smile. "So glad you came," she said, but her voice was cold. I asked why we were seated so far away, and she let out a little laugh before answering. "Well, you guys aren't like the others here. Marcos' family is important, and I didn't want you to feel out of place. I thought you'd be better off here, apart." I was speechless. Out of place? I wanted to scream that we weren't beggars, that we had a decent life, but Javier touched my arm, as if saying, "It's not worth it." Sophia left quickly, leaving us alone in that corner. I felt a mix of anger and shame. After all I'd worked for get ahead, my own sister treated me like a burden. We sat in silence. The others laughed and toasted at the main tables while we seemed invisible. I tried to calm down, but every time I saw Sophia parading around with Marcos, my fury grew. How could she be such a hypocrite? She had lied to her fiancé about our past, claiming we came from a normal family, not the poverty she despised so much. Javier tried to cheer me up, saying it was her night and we shouldn't ruin it, but I was fed up. Then something unexpected happened. I saw Marcos walking toward us, tall in an expensive suit with a confident smile. Sophia trailed behind him, looking worried. "You must be Anna, Sophia's sister," he said, shaking my hand. "And you're Javier, her husband. A pleasure." Javier returned the greeting, always polite. "Congratulations on the engagement," he said. Marcos smiled, but then looked at Javier more closely, his eyes widening as if he'd just recognized him. "Wait a second," he said, laughing. "Javier Ramirez?" "The Javier Ramirez from the construction company." Sophia turned pale. I didn't understand. "You know him?" I asked, looking at my husband. Marcos turned to Sophia. still laughing. Love, didn't you tell me your brother-in-law is one per se one of the majority shareholders of my company? This is incredible. And that's when everything exploded. The room seemed to spin as Marcos kept laughing, like he just found a hidden treasure. Javier, my husband, frowned, trying to recall. I looked at him, waiting for an explanation. Though I knew he was important at his company, I never dug into the details. He was always humble, coming home with dirty hands and a smile, never talking about boardroom meetings or big numbers. But now Marcos was looking at him like he was a legend. Don't you remember me? Marcos said, clapping Javier on the shoulder. A few years ago, when I was just starting as a minor partner in a construction company, you were already one of the big shots. That mall project in the north, that's the one that put me on the map, and you were in charge of it all. Javier nodded slowly, as if the pieces were falling into place. Yeah, I think I remember you, he said calmly, as always. You were the new guy with the crazy ideas. Good ones. Glad it worked out for you. That was an understatement. Marcos was a partner in the same company, where Javier held a much higher position, one I'd never fully grasped because he didn't boast. While Sophia had seated us at that isolated table for not being rich enough, it turned out my husband was more influential and powerful than her fiancé. The irony hit me like a bucket of cold water. I looked at Sophia. Her face was white, her lips tight. She tried to smile, but it was clear she was panicking. Well, what a small world, she said with a nervous laugh. I had no idea you knew each other. No idea? I snapped, unable to hold back anymore. Or did you not want anyone to know who we really are? You put us here like we're an embarrassment, Sophia, when you're the one who's been lying this whole time. The air grew heavy. Marco stopped laughing and looked between us, confused. What's she talking about? He asked, turning to Sophia. She tried to change the subject, placing a hand on his arm. It's nothing, love. Anna's just exaggerating. You know how sisters are, always with their drama. But I couldn't stop. I'd spent years enduring her disdain, her comments about my simple life, the way she looked at me like I was less for not chasing money like she did. And now, after humiliating us at her party, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. No, Marcos, I said, looking him in the eye, it's not drama. Sophia's been lying to you from the start. She told you we come from a normal family, that she always had a comfortable life. That's nonsense. We grew up poor, in a house where sometimes there wasn't even enough to eat. I worked like crazy to get out of that, but her, she used her pretty face to hook men with money. She's gone from one to the next, always chasing someone richer. And you're just the latest on her list. The silence was deafening. Nearby guests started whispering, and Sophia turned red. Whether from shame or fury, I couldn't tell. Marcos took a step back, like he needed space to process. Is that true? He asked her, his voice more serious now. No, Sophia shouted too quickly. She's jealous. She's always been jealous. She wants to ruin my night because she can't stand that I have something better than her. Better? I said, laughing bitterly. Look at you, Sophia. You put us at this table because you're ashamed of where we come from. But the truth is, Javier has more success than your fiancé, and he earned it without stepping on anyone. You, on the other hand, have nothing of your own. Everything you are, you owe to the men you've used. Marcos crossed his arms, looking at Sophia with a mix of doubt and disappointment. Explain this, he said, because if what your sister says is true, you've been selling me a very different story. Sophia started stammering, saying I was crazy, that I was exaggerating, that it wasn't fair for me to ruin her engagement. But the more she talked, the more she tangled herself. Marcos wasn't stupid. He could see the cracks in her facade, and I wasn't going to let her patch them up with more lies. You know what? I said, looking at Marcos. Ask her how many rich boyfriends she had before you. Ask her why she's never had a real job. Ask her how she paid for her things before she met you. She'll call me a liar, but deep down you know I'm not. Marcos stayed quiet for a moment, then looked at Sophia. Tell me the truth, he said, his voice low but firm. She tried to hold it together, but her eyes filled with tears. It's not how she makes it sound. she murmured. Yes, we had a tough life, but I just wanted something better. Is that a crime? You gave me that life, Marcos. Don't let her ruin it. But he wasn't looking at her with love anymore. There was something cold in his eyes, like he'd just woken up from a dream. It's not about wanting better, he said. It's about lying, about using people. If this is true, I don't know who you really are. Sophia let out a choke sob and turned to me, her face full of hate. This is your fault, she screamed. You just destroyed my night, my life, my ticket to something better. Are you happy now? No, I said calmly. I'm not happy. I'm just tired of you. Marcos raised a hand to stop the fight. Enough, he said. I need to think about this. This isn't what I expected from my engagement. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Sophia trembling and me with my heart pounding. Javier took my hand. Let's go, he said quietly. You've done what you needed to. I nodded, and as we walked to the exit, I felt everyone's eyes on us. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't care what they thought. I'd told the truth, and that was enough. The echo of the party still rang in my head as we left the venue. The cool night air hit me like a reminder that everything had changed. Javier held my hand as we walked to the car, his presence solid and calm as always. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. He knew what it meant for me to confront Sophia, to break years of silence against her disdain. The separate table, her lies to Marcos, the way she humiliated us in front of everyone. It had been the final push to say enough. The drive home was quiet. The city lights flashed by the window, and my mind kept racing. I remembered our childhood in that small house with a leaking roof and half-painted walls. Sophia and me sharing a bed, her complaining about the food, while I dreamed of a better future. I remembered studying under a dim lamp, the endless shifts at the supermarket, the pride in my parents' eyes when I graduated. And then I thought of Sophia, always looking for shortcuts, using her beauty to hook men who could give her what she thought she deserved, each one richer, each relationship emptier. When I married Javier, she laughed at my simple life. But now, after what happened at the party, her facade had crumbled. Marcos had seen who she really was, and I had finally freed myself from her weight. The next day, my phone started buzzing nonstop. It was Sophia, one furious message after another. You ruined my life, she wrote. Marcos left me because of you. He was my ticket to something better, and you destroyed it because you're jealous. Her words were pure venom, but they didn't surprise me. Sophia never took responsibility for anything. It was always someone else's fault. Mine, our parents, the world's for not giving her what she wanted. I decided not to respond. There was nothing left to say. She dug her own hole, and I wasn't going to keep carrying her mistakes. That afternoon, my mom called, her voice shaky, as if she feared what she was about to say. She told me Sophia had shown up at their house that morning with an old suitcase and red eyes from crying. She said Marcos had confronted her after the party, demanding explanations about her lies and her past. When she couldn't defend herself, he called off the engagement privately, saying he couldn't trust someone who lived on deception. Now Sophia was alone, with no money or place to stay. My parents, always soft on her, didn't know what to do. Should we let her stay? My mom asked. She's your sister, Anna, but after what you told us, I don't know if we can keep doing this. I listened in silence as she spoke, remembering all the times my parents had given Sophia chances. When she left home at 18 with a rich boyfriend, when she came back months later penniless, when she promised a change and never did. Each time, they welcomed her with open arms, hoping she'd grow up, but I knew she wouldn't. Sophia didn't want to change. She wanted the world to bend to her. Mom, I said finally, you can't keep rescuing her. If you let her stay, set conditions. She needs to get a job, pay something, show she wants to be different. But if she won't, you have to let her go. There was a long silence on the other end. I heard my dad mutter something, and my mom sighed. You're right, she said. We've always given her too much. If she stays, it'll be on our terms. But we won't support her like she's a child anymore. I was surprised to hear that. My parents had always been soft on Sophia. The the baby of the family who could get away with anything with a smile. But it seemed at this time, after everything, they were tired too. Still, part of me felt pity, not exactly for Sophia, but for what could have been. We were sisters, after all. We'd grown up together, shared laughs and secrets before money and her ambitions drove us apart. I thought maybe, just maybe, there was a chance she could change if someone extended a hand. I knew a friend of Javier's, Luis, who owned a clothing store downtown. It wasn't fancy, but he needed an employee to help customers and manage inventory. It was honest work, something that could give Sophie a start if she was willing to try. I called Luis, explained the situation without too many details, and he agreed to offer her the job. If she wants to work, tell her to come talk to me, he said. But I'm not going to beg her. That afternoon, I went to my parents' house to talk to Sophia. When I arrived, I found her sitting on the living room couch, her hair messy, her expression swinging between anger and defeat. When she saw me, her eyes lit up with hate. "Nice of you to come gloat," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I guess you're happy now that I'm left with nothing." "That's not why I'm here," I said, keeping calm though her words stung. "I got you a job. It's at a clothing store. It doesn't pay much, but it's a start. If you want it, the owner's willing to give you a chance. It's up to you." She let out a bitter laugh, like I'd told a bad joke. "A job at a store? You think I'm going to stoop that low after everything I've had? Standing all day selling rags? I'd rather starve than live like you." Her words hit like a punch, but they didn't surprise me. It was the same Sophia, the one who thought honest work was for losers, who believed her beauty would save her forever. I looked at her for a moment, searching for any sign of regret, but there was nothing, just contempt. "Fine," I said finally. "Then there's nothing more to say." I said goodbye to my parents, who looked at me with a mix of sadness and resignation, and left the house without looking back. Days later, my mom called again, her voice low, almost a whisper. She told me Sophia had left the house that morning. She didn't say where, only left a note saying she'd find another way to get ahead. I figured she'd look for another man with money, like she always had. Maybe she already had someone in mind, someone who promised the luxury she craved. My parents didn't go after her, and neither did I. We'd reached our limit. Sophia had chosen her path, and it wasn't our job to save her. Weeks passed, and life returned to normal. Javier and I went back to our routine, him working on his projects, me at my office, evenings cooking together or watching a movie on the couch. One afternoon, as we sipped coffee in the living room, he looked at me and smiled. "You okay with all this?" he asked. "I know it was hard letting go of your sister." I thought for a moment before answering. "Yeah," I said. "It wasn't easy, but I'm tired of carrying her poison. We have a good life. Javier, we don't need someone dragging us down." He nodded, and I knew that chapter was closed. Sophie was no longer part of my world, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. We decided to move forward, focus on what we had, a home, a solid love, and the peace of knowing we'd built our life with effort, not deceit.